Hey everybody, welcome to the C-Mask podcast. We've got Elliot Hulse, Nicholas Stumphauser, and Timothy Gordon. If you haven't checked it out yet, go and have a look at Tim's recent debate on whether we need an infallible tradition on Trent Horn's channel. That was recent. Great thing for you to go and watch. But today we are discussing the first commandment and why Christianity is masculine. I don't know about you guys, but I hear a lot that religion isn't masculine. Real men don't worship. Why do you want to bow down to anything, bro? You need to stand on your own 2 feet and never kneel. That's wrong, though. And the main message of today throughout the show is going to be that masculinity is really only fully fulfilled by Christianity. And worship is the most important thing we can do as men, and it's what perfects us. Before we get into why, though, thinking about the first commandment, this is what it's all about. What have you guys noticed just in the culture at large about the attitude men have to religion? Tim, start with you.
Well, you said it. A real man is his own master, which a derivative iteration of that is true. But a real man bows to the king, and that's at odds with taking the former proposition fully literally. A real man is wrought of self-mastery, but his self-mastery is also ordered to his telos, which is worship. So a real man does not worship false gods, which would contradict his reason for being. A real man worships the one true God. Of course, that's kind of, I guess, unpacking and justifying the popular thing out there. But yeah, you get it. I mean, we get it a lot when we dialogue with the more secular, often more anti-Christian, like red pill guys. They're genuinely like, why would you want to do this, man, when you can be your own God? And you're like, you're just hitting me with Luciferian logic. You just are too dumb to know it.
Yeah, I love the point about it being Luciferian there, because that really is what it's about. The refusal to kneel, the refusal to serve is rooted in pride. And it's funny, isn't it, Nick, that these same guys who will say that worship is something that's at odds with masculinity will often be quite quick to say, oh no, you got to pay Tate or whoever the respect that he's due. Like, you don't want to stare that guy in the eyes too long. We know who our superiors are. There's a pecking order. And they'll show honor, they'll show reverence to other men that they think are the top G or they think are the man. So they've got this inbuilt craving for a kind of loyalty. I liked what you said a while ago on the message group that we have about it being almost like a feudal loyalty. Every man wants to be in a hierarchy and have someone to serve. So that's built into us. But when it comes to religion, for some reason, they throw it all out.
Yeah, and then I'm also remembering or reflecting on the contrast between sort of evangelical Protestant worship leader and then like a sincere young Catholic person or even old Catholic person, just a trad or something, who might go to a Latin mass where there's not a whole lot of singing or there's a lot of quiet during the mass and might pray a rosary at night, and then contrasting that with like the very performative worship of the Protestants. And then, I was born in 98, but still, I know JP2 is a little bit before that when he started the whole World Youth Day and stuff like that. But by the time I was 12 years old, I went to Steubenville, Ohio, where they had this Catholic youth conference, and there's 2,000 kids there, 2,000 or 3,000 kids, and I remember being exposed for the first time to that very effusive, like acoustic guitar, flashing lights, smoke machine type worship, and feeling like deeply unsettled, like there's something wrong about this. And so,
yeah,
the red pill community or the secular community probably is averse to that kind of worship with good reason. That's just not what we're talking about.
It's like feeling like a guy just hit on you. when you experience that for the first time. Like, I need to go take a shower. What's going on? That's the phenomenology of that Franciscan feeling. Sorry, not my answer.
No, there's a good point. No, you just look at it and think, why are you gay? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
So, Elliot, you are a guy who's about strength in everything, mental strength, physical strength, spiritual as well. People can go back and look at some of your videos from 8, 9, 10 years ago, and you very much pushed this thing through by yourself, and you're not the kind of guy to, make a point of depending on other people to get you places. You've got lots of drive. As an entrepreneur, this is a big part of your personality. But you, Neil, and you don't see that as something that is weak in you. So tell me a bit about what it means to you to have something to kneel to.
Well, a real man has a father. As unfortunate as it is that we live in a world where there's not many fathers or good fathers, but to have a father gives you an image of what God the Father is like. And if you have a good father, you can't help but to, at some point, at least it was for me in my life, return to the Father, return to my father. The word father comes from the word pattern. And we know from developmental psychology that as opposed to women, men in many ways are a blank slate. And it is for that very reason that we look up. You mentioned hierarchy, and it begins when we're very young and we realize that, well, I come from my mother. I'm very attached to my mother for sustenance, but at some point there becomes a break from the mother. And if there's no father to look up towards, well, then the ascension plan, there's no pattern. There's nothing to aspire to or strive for. And so when Antonio Gramsci, one of the founders of cultural Marxism, took to destroying Western civilization, in his own words, he understood that it meant that we needed to remove the father. He said, de-Christianize the West. Well, that coincides with removing the father from the home. And so the unfortunate situation here, where with most men who are literally fatherless, they have no pretension towards and no pattern for God the Father. And we know that religion is masculine because it's created by men. It's created by fathers, the father of faith, Abraham, right? I mean, the church fathers, we call them fathers. And so I can't help but to think that this movement towards atheism comes as a result of the breakdown of the family, the removal of the father from the home, the removal of God the Father from the public sphere. And that is all concomitant with ism. And so if you're a man who's a nun, right, you have no religion or you identify as none, these nuns, not like the cloistered nuns, but just have none, you're essentially putting your hand up and saying, yes, I abide by and follow the rule of the feminist doctrine. And I don't know man. And so I don't need no man as my father, probably because he was defaced in the home, either by being weak or because, there was just completely disordered. And I don't need no man, meaning I don't need any father. I don't need any pattern. I don't need anything to ascribe to and to look towards and to pattern myself after. The only alternative to that then becomes egalitarianism, the flatness. And that's very much how women are designed. This is not a knock against women, but women don't look up the same way to other women as men look to fathers in leadership. Women are a little bit more, I like to say that they've got a grace about them, almost like an instinct for what it is to be a woman, even if they're into a mother. It's inborn. There's a period. There's a mark. There's the delineation between being, a child, which is in many ways asexual, right, before puberty, and what is required for a man. Men, because it's such a clean slate in that way, there's a lot of potential See, the potential for men is more spiritual. What potential for a woman is very physical. It's very ingrained. Their potential is in proliferation. Their potential is in childbearing and giving birth. But a man's potential is existential. It's high, it's wide, it's big, it's limitless. And so we're in a place where it's kind of weird because although we still are men, if there is no pattern, then there's pure anarchy. If there is no pattern, if there is no right way, if there is no father in the home or father above, then there's no humility. And so it leads us to where we find ourselves today, where we're so prideful. I forget the word I'm thinking of, but that we become our own gods. You listen to these guys in the economic forum, the World Economic Forum. They literally, I can't name the dude, but he speaks of the end of the need for any god because
Noah Yuval Harari.
Are God. We are God. Yeah, we are God, and that's dangerous because a man will look up regardless. And if he's not seeing the eternal pattern, God the Father, the divine, he's going to look to governments. He's going to look to sports figures. He's going to look to red pill influencers. He's going to find a God eventually. It's just going to be a God that doesn't have his best interest in mind.
So much great stuff there, Elliot. Everything you say is always really wise. A couple of things that I think are really important. One, men do tend to be more hierarchical. Even by age 3, you give little boys the chance to compete, they'll take it. You give girls the choice, they'll prefer to cooperate rather than compete. So men are looking for that pyramid, the dominance hierarchy. That's why we seek it in religion too. Next point was about the destruction of authority in the family being related to the destruction of authority and hierarchy in religion. So Marx said that the key to the destruction of the holy family was the destruction of the earthly family. He made that same connection, Elliot. They know exactly what they are doing. And then the other point that I think we should work with there is the idea of honesty. If we look at it honestly, we are going to worship these men who pretend to do without God, pretend to say that worship is beneath them. They might end up worshiping some tech guru or some political guru. It's going to happen. And if you're honest about it, you want to be worshiping something that is worthy of it. And the point of the first commandment is there's only one being worthy of this, which is God. And we'll get into the reason for this in a moment. But for people who might not know it, maybe you're not Christian, but you're listening and you're curious, let's just recap from the Baltimore Catechism on the first 2 commandments. The 2 great commandments that contain the whole law of God are, first, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart and with thy whole soul and with thy whole mind and with thy whole strength. Second, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So these are the 2 big ones. And then the Baltimore Catechism also explains that to love God, our neighbor, and ourselves, we must keep the commandments of God and of the church and perform the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. So this isn't just about believing things. It's also about works. It's about action too. This is about being a man of action in the world who is acting on his beliefs, justified true beliefs. And then here is where we get into the idea that both of these commandments are really just contained in the first one. So the whole of the law of God can be reduced just to the love of God. Why? Because the proper motive to love our neighbor and to love ourselves as well is the love of God. So that ultimately is what a man's whole life is about. And Aquinas says that the virtue of religion is primarily a matter of honesty. Now, what does it mean to you, Tim, for religion to be about honesty?
The right reflection of that rapport, that relation between worshipper and worshiper. Well, worship and worshiper, sorry. So you just said it. The state of nature reflects an order that the Creator created the creatures, and all the sentient creatures are literally made higher than the non-sentient ones in order to worship and thereby unify with God. You can hear this stuff in grade school. I hope everyone heard it in grade school. So much that you stop to believe it. But it's a right order. It's like asking on a football team, well, the center's not doing his job. The center's not doing his job. I guess we need to get another one. The center doesn't do the job of the quarterback or the halfback, right? Or a slot receiver. He has to do a particular job. And that's in this rapport of creation. Creatures naturally worship their creator. So honesty means accurate speech and proper action in regard to that relation. So your point here, Will, is just, it's dead on. And all of us kind of overlooked it in our answers, but it's just you ever notice how one of the strengths that men have over women is they can just deal with stuff. You tell a man no when he really wants to hear yes. You tell a woman no when she really wants to hear yes. And even a good woman, we're assuming a good woman, good man. A man just is immediately, I was not hoping for that answer. All right, what must I do? Like Frodo in the ring. All right, fine. This is going to destroy everything, and it's currently in my possession. What must I do? The women take longer to roll with it, even very good women. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. It would be, I guess, sort of dope if we were our own master. I mean, not really, because then you know you're just going to die and your life was worthless. And there's also very childish conception of a creation ex nihilo without the creation ex nihilo. So when you find there really is a God, and that, as Michael Knowles often says, it's all true, everything we were taught in grade school, what you're really learning is, insofar as it's all true, I was born to worship. So the honest manly man is like, I don't want to not worship. That is, I don't want to fail to worship. I don't want to worship the wrong thing. Most specifically, I don't want to worship myself through baser, which would be a baser rapport, the adequation of baser desires, which is what everyone who worships themselves does. They don't worship themselves by doing the good. It's kind of a proof text. The only way to worship God is by doing the good. So it's honesty. It's that masculine honesty. One final thing I would just say, because I'm not done yet this week taking Catholic pot shots at Protestants. Faith does mean a lived intellectual life, a lived intellectual rapport with God. Remember, our faith, the Roman Catholic faith, it's actually an anathematized heresy to state that one cannot know God through natural reason alone. Know of the oneness of God through natural reason alone. That's not an act of faith. Now, Protestants seem to have made a different kind of epistemic knowledge. There's head knowledge, and then there's gut knowledge or heart knowledge, and it's episteme here, episteme there. That's not what faith is. In the Greek, faith is pistis, not episteme. So you know what you know about God and your relationship with him and your duty to worship him intellectually, because it is right reason, recto ratio, that the creature should worship his creator. But when we talk about, okay, do you have faith in God? That means do you live in accord with what you know about the world and your place in it, particularly qua God? So it's pistis means action. Pistis does not mean a second kind of episteme. This one's in your gut or your heart. It's just Protestant nonsense. Faith means living out your relationship with God as only a creature would vis-a-vis his creator.
Exactly right. And recapping on that for anybody who needs to hear it, what Tim's saying is that religion is about the recognition of order, and it's also about the understanding of hierarchy and following out what it entails for God to be the first principle, for us to owe our very being to him. Not just at one moment a long time ago in the past, but every single instant being upheld in being by him. So the idea that you can be your own master somehow, when even your very existence depends on God rather than on yourself, is just crazy when you think about it. And the other point I want to point out here is that because God is the first principle and all that entails, then it's not just a matter of honesty. It is that, as Tim says, it's also about honor as well. Remember earlier when we talked about guys who claim that worship isn't masculine, but then will want to pay a gang leader, for example, or a guy that they respect, the honor that is due to him. Now think about religion in those terms. If God is first principle and has all the infinite excellences that involves, you can't pay him enough honor, given what he is as a being. There's no way you can possibly honor him enough. And if you try to put anything else in his place, then it's not worthy of it. So religion is about the debt of honor that we owe to God. Nick, does that make sense to you? Religion is a matter of honesty, but also honor. And it's men being in God's debt. It's not some mushy feeling you get when you read scripture based on your own take on it.
Yeah, I think the honor kicks in when the natural proclivity to worship might be gone, and the longing, the natural longing for it, and that's when you remember a debt. You know, I don't necessarily want to do this. I don't really feel like doing this, but as a man, I could just assess the situation and understand this is reality, and therefore I will comply with it. It's very effeminate to, well, so I'll backtrack for a second. My all-time favorite book, and you know, some trads are gonna have a conniption because everybody has an opinion on this book, but it's Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, and I think it's one of the greatest love poems to the Logos by accident, because she was an atheist. And yet when you read the book, there's so many instances where Rand is recognizing the true nature of reality because she's an Aristotelian. And when we operate in accordance with it, there's a delight if and only if you are a well-ordered person who's willingly engaging with reality as opposed to denying truth. And truth is about reality. And one of the things she discusses is that in a well-ordered person, the success of another person is not seen as the enemy or taking something from you. And when I think about like healthy men, when they see another man succeed, it feels not only right from a hierarchical standpoint, but also feels good in your soul to dap up your brother, to compliment him, say, well done. Hey, you did an awesome job, and I admire this attribute in you. You're doing a great thing here. And so that delights us. And it's only when you start to mangle your soul that the success of those around you, or the admirable virtues, becomes bitterness in you. And what do we see today? But when somebody is told that there's a source of all of those things, that they have to deny its existence, because the alternative is sort of the annihilation of your own existence when you realize the disparity between the two. But I think like a rightly ordered masculine heart, it becomes worship, because, you know, you hear like, if a woman really loves you, she's going to worship you. Well, why? Because she looks up to you in everything. She sees you as the authority on prudential matters. She sees you as the most interesting thing. She sees you as the most romantic thing. And so all of that, we colloquially say that's worshiping. She worships him. Well, guess what? The source of all of those things is God, and we were made for love. So eros, right, the upward spiral toward the true, the good, and the beautiful, is that worship. So when you're truly in love with God, then it is worship, and vice versa. And it's only when we start to become depraved and our ego grows, that we have to actually destroy that proclivity and destroy the concept of God, because otherwise we ourselves will be condemned, as rightly we should be in our sin.
Nick, you and I have a mutual friend. We won't say who it is, that would regularly contradict that. When I would, independent of you, express that what you just beautifully expressed about, that's totally true about well-ordered, manly, straight men that had a father. Yeah, man, I'm so happy when Elliot has a success. I'm so happy when Will has a success. I'm so happy when Nick has a success. Particularly in the context of a conversation. This mutual friend of ours would always say, "Oh no, every conversation has a winner and a loser." It's the antithesis of what you just described, and the way cause this is how you are fundamentally as a man and as a friend, like rooting for your brothers. It's like one of the first things one notes about you. You told me you had that in a different context, slightly the same conversation with this person several times. Person we both have fondness for, but wow, what a disordered and sad worldview to really think that every conversation between two men has a winner and a loser. I get so much out of my conversations with you one-on-one, Elliot one-on-one, Will one-on-one, all the other good men that I'm blessed to know. I'm proud to call myself your guys' friend, and it just tells one that when one has a conversation with someone like the person that told us both that, it's like, I just feel sad for you, man, because I'm not naive. You are, but it's a kind of, at least if I were wrong in my naivete, I would believe something that's a white pill about the world. That's a total black pill to believe that it's the Hobbesian war of all against all every time you open your mouth.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a passing note.
No, it's true. And the gifts that people have been given by God for them to benefit everyone else with them as well. Like if you watch Tim's recent debate, Tim's got a really, really strong mind. He's quick, he's articulate, he thinks well on his feet, and he can memorize things like most people can't. And when you watch that in action, you're just thinking, isn't it great to be able to see this? Everyone can benefit from it. It's not showy. It's just that he's been given a gift and he's using it how it's supposed to be used. And you should be happy seeing that. And the point Nick's making there about when you get a warped soul and you become debased and how you can't see these things. Elliot, I'm wondering what the connection is between worship and actually making ourselves better. Because there's this misconception that God somehow needs us to worship him, as if we can add anything to his glory. But really the reason we worship is for us, right? It's good for us to worship.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, going back to the father analogy, how much better off is a man that does have a father, something to pattern after, something to strive after and to look up to? So if you want to be the best version of yourself, the strongest version of yourself, then why not look to the mentor of mentors, the one who loves you the most, right? Look up to God the Father. You know, if you have an opportunity to work with or at the feet of someone who loves you, someone who created you, someone who has all the blessings and all of the tools, all of the everything that you need to be the best you, wouldn't you crawl through glass and fire to get there? I think that we've been so far removed from the power that's possible with trust in the Lord. And of course, because of so much self-trust and self-love, that we fall short of what glory God has in store for us. I have to be completely honest, a part of why I seek out God is because I seek myself. I want to be the best me. And I've heard, I got to be completely transparent, that a lot of this comes from my new age background. But this idea that the closer you are to the source, the closer you are to the source of being, to God, the universe, whatever you choose to call it in the state that you find yourself, the more you actually are, the more talents you can express, the sharper your ideas, the things you were talking about, how Tim expresses himself with such grace, all the grace that's possible. Like, in a way, I'm greedy for God. I want more of God because I know that I fall short and I could be so much more. There could be so much more abundance in so many different ways. The graces and the gifts that God has for us boggle the mind. I can't even imagine what he wants for me. And I repent daily for falling short of that and realize that all the works that I do, all the activities I engage in, all of the grinding and going it's almost like a child trying to like a child that can't walk yet, trying to climb stairs or trying to sprint, when all you got to do is reach up and it's like, hey, Dad, just pick me up. And he can sprint with me. He can run with me. He can put me where I need to be. And my walk has really been more a matter of doing less, trusting more, reaching up for the Father to grab me and put me where only he could put me. What an amazing opportunity we have if we would just humble ourselves and ask.
Yeah, I love that answer, Elliot. And it's funny, isn't it? I know in your past, you've had guys travel hundreds of miles hoping to be mentored by you. And what you're saying is, with God, you've got the ultimate mentor. Men, again, naturally seek this. You wouldn't hear someone saying, oh, it's effeminate to be mentored by Elliot. I don't want a guy who's successful to take me under his wing and teach me how to be a better man. No, they love that stuff. And what you're saying is that with God, you get that to the maximum. Not just like a difference in degree, but in kind, because no man is perfect. So he can't give you perfection. But when you go to God for mentorship, he has that perfection to give. So that's why it's so powerful. And the reason why it's good for us to worship is that, like Tim said at the start, we are built for this. So by recognizing the honor that we owe to God, it's actually a healthy thing for us to do. It's good for your soul in the way that, for example, exercise is for your body. When we subject ourselves to what we're supposed to be subjected to, that is what perfects us. So it makes your mind clearer and it makes you stronger as well. Nick?
Something that I'm clarifying right now is that this concept of being built for worship, or built to love God, or when we go to heaven, we're going to be worshiping and loving God for all eternity and singing his praises. When you go through like Catholic schooling as a kid and you hear that, it sounds like God was deficient, and so he made a slave class so he could feel good about himself for all eternity. And that's just not what it means to be built to worship. It's like, by the very nature of our existence, it is rightly ordered for us to glorify the source of the true, the beautiful, and the good. That's what it means to be like built to worship, not built like a robot to move Amazon packages. So I just think that's a helpful distinction.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like your son. It's like when you're out. Have you ever just had your son out?
No,
Elliot or Will, and you're like teaching him how to do something. You're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is what I was born. This is what I was born to do. But in this and that crude analogy, I'm a little like the creator, and he's a little like the creature. Pure analogy, no species to genus relationship there. And you're like, wow, this is so good. It's such a good feeling for me. It's good for him in a different way. That there's no analogy with God, because it's not good to him. It's not bonus. You're not adding the good. I forget what that is. Bonus templum or something. But yeah, from the creature's perspective, it's like, this is so healthy for the son to be taking, my son Gabriel to be taking my instruction. And there's so much love that it generates from the worship, the worship.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think of this in contrast to Islam, because the beautiful thing about the Trinity is that you've got sharing and relationality built into the divinity. And there's no Islamic magisterium to actually say this definitively, but you have some Islamic scholars who will say that Allah had to create to know himself. He needed creation. Whereas in Christianity, that's just not the case. It's purely superfluous, an act of love, like sharing. Isn't this great? Come join in with it. It doesn't need us, doesn't need our worship, but it's still good for us to offer it. So that's important to think about. Worship is what perfects us as human beings in general, but also as men specifically. And it's about honesty. It's about honor. It's about what we owe to God. It's not just squishy feelings. Now, the next point that comes in is that we can't have too much religion. You can't take it too seriously in principle, because it's an infinite debt. We can't repay what God has given us. And there's no way that we can be the first principle to him. There's an asymmetry there. So we're not expected to be able to repay it fully, but we are going to be judged on the willingness we have to actually try to repay it, acknowledge the debt, and offer everything we have. Even in the case of the martyrs, for example, our very lives. So let's talk about this. Tim, some people say, oh, why are you so religious? Don't take it so seriously. But it's the most serious thing, most serious set of facts that a man can face, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like asking someone who eats really well and takes really good care of his body, like, why do you take this so seriously? Times 100 million, right? It's like, why do you take such good care of your metabolic system? Like, everything you eat is clean, and you eat the moderate amount, the right thing at the right time in the right way. You just take it so seriously, and it's making you so healthy. Isn't that gross? To attempt, like Marx did, or Engels, or any of the historic Luciferians. So many in the American tradition that people don't even know about are Luciferians. Yeah, Saul Alinsky, any of that class of people that are like, that's gross. Isn't it really gross to be healthy and strong? Think about it. And all the morons that, particularly in the Ivy Leagues and trickle down students all around the West, were like, yeah, I guess it is. What is the compelling force here? To look at a strong person that's healthy and fit, you know their vascular health's good, you know their heart's in good shape. To look at that and to get everyone with emperor's new clothes, like plain mendacity, I don't know what else to call it, to get everyone, a whole crowd, to say, yeah, that's gross. And then, I mean, think of the body positivity movement. To look at a great big fatso who's now called like the new portrait of beauty, and to get that same pathetic crowd, I mean, just a mob, all crowds are mobs, to say, yeah, that's beauty. It's really, and it's an absurdity that is bounded only by our age. But to do that with worship is 100 million times more serious, and maybe not 100 million times more obvious. Maybe it's actually subtler, but it's 100 million times more important, because not physical fitness, but worship is literally what we were created for. Worship is literally what demarcates our relation to the Creator. So it's especially egregious when it's subverted, unlike, body positivity movement. That's really egregious on the eyes. You just want to go around wanting to puke every commercial. If you ever put on the TV again, they're all fatzos. But like, it's a deep, deep wound. It's the deep wound to convince any of the creatures that they ought not to be worshiping the Creator, because it's going to condemn them, send them to hell. Michael Lofton fans out there, condemn means to damn. By the way, a violation of the first commandment is anytime a creature worships another creature. That's I think the best definition I've ever heard. Any worship of any other creature. So you can worship your baseball cards or your new Corvette, or you can worship a lot of a study just came out revealing something we've already known, that really only morons get into celebrity culture, worshiping a fellow, someone who is of a rational animal nature, someone of your species. Anything. It can be anything. Anytime a creature worships a fellow creature instead of everything Elliot's been talking about, this pointing up and worshiping the creator, it fundamentally subverts not only what that rapport should be, but it subverts who we are, because it's the most central act which defines and expresses who we are.
Yep. And obviously, Satan is wicked smart, literally. That's what he's all about. And one of the main forms of worship we see around us now is simping, men being reduced to worshipping women and being slaves to lust. And the irony of that is that you take what is supposed to be the natural order between men and women, and men have been told that this is masculine, promiscuity is masculine. But by absorbing that message, it deranges them, it debases them to actually lower than the level of the bull in the field that we often talk about. The bull in the field is still the boss. He's not simping. But the man who's addicted to webcam girls, for example, who will throw away all his savings, his mortgage on them, he's been degraded in a far worse way, because idolatry is always going to corrupt you. So, Elliot, what Tim's pointing out here is that when it comes to the moral virtues, like religion is number one, is the most important one that we can think about. And the reason for that, Aquinas says, is that religion approaches nearer to God than the other moral virtues, insofar as its actions are directly and immediately ordered to the honor of God. So what we're saying here is that if we get this big thing in our lives wrong, if we get our relationship to God, our creator, wrong, then everything else is going to go wrong like a ripple effect. This is like the foundation of what it means to be a strong man. And you talk a lot about how virtue really is about virility and strength, and this is how men need to thrive. So I wonder if you could explain what this idea means to you. A man's got to get right with God first for the rest of his life to be a success.
Well, if God is the source of all being, it's like tapping into, using the analogy of strength training. It's like the strongest steroid there is. It's the organic steak. It's the highest of all nutritionally valuable substances, right? Like once again, going back to it being a selfish pursuit in some ways. I want the best. I want the best of the best. And what's better than the creator that is the foundation for what's best?
That's exactly right. So this is like rocket fuel for a man, because it's what we're designed to run on. And whatever substitute you try to have instead is not going to give you the same flourishing life. I like that analogy.
Can we address really quickly an objection to that?
Yep.
Well, because I know out there what they're saying. I know what the red pill guys would say. I know what other secular strength trainers would say. I know what secular entrepreneurs that would say. They'd be like, yo, man, I've never worshiped God a day in my life. Maybe leastways not after grade school. That's child's play. And look at me. I'm super strong. I'm super wealthy. I'm super capable. A lot of smart people are condemned. A lot of midwits are condemned to, hey, I'm really smart. Look at me. What have I done then? You guys just said it's like rocket fuel for all of these even earthly successes. So how do you explain me? And here's how. This is a great disappointment to me as someone that was, an athlete, a serious athlete growing up. Once I got to adulthood, the people I knew that were professional, were either professional athletes or D1 athletes in basketball or football. Is like being professional in any other sport. It's harder to be D1 in basketball or football than any other sport, to even, to be a pro in any other sport. So I've known lots of these people, and I'm like, wow, you know, I always admired that you made it further, you know, pro or D1 than I did in this. But then you see some major flaw. They are completely ruled over by their wife. They're completely ruled over by their parents, usually the mother. I'm talking 30-year-old, 35-year-old, 40-year-old, something I see in day-to-day life. They're completely, the same thing with rich guys, complete simps. They might take pictures with beautiful women and try to make it look like, you know, I'm living it up. These women want to be with me because I have so much money or muscles or prowess. But there's always a flaw, usually in relationality to other creatures, usually women, that just comes out in the wash right away. Wow. You know, professional basketball players, professional fighters, you're like, whoa, this is so cool. This is what, you know, the only sports I've ever loved are basketball, football, and boxing. And then you see, I mean, even, I kind of hate to do it publicly because I've always wanted to interview this Catholic, but Tyson Fury, you know, the second that guy stops boxing, I love Tyson Fury. He's amazing to watch. The second he stops boxing, he just loses it. He'll say something super Catholic one day, and then he'll talk about, you know, in his whatever it was, trilogy fight with Wilder, how many times he fapped per day to keep him manly. I'm like, I thought you were being a Catholic advocate. What the fuck? So you just see, oh, these guys that are trying to make it on their own. Not that Fury's an atheist. He is a Catholic, but he struggles with it. They might be great at one of the particulars, but they can't get the holistic excellence of virtue, even the natural virtues, that they're bragging about one of them without God. You can't get the panoply of the natural virtues without taking very seriously the supernatural virtues, which only come from God. They're infused. That's very powerful to me. So yes, I know you can go forward and excel in just money making and just bodybuilding and just basketball, football, boxing, just at being a wimpy little smarty pants. But the only guys I've ever known, I'm with three of them here, who were at least making a serious endeavor of chasing down all of the natural virtues described in the Nicomachean Ethics, were all to the man Catholics, to the man. I mean, maybe Orthodox, I might say I've known one or two, but none of all of those guys that we're talking about that would posit the objection. I'm rich, I'm strong, I'm super fast, I'm super smart, I'm super successful. Nope. But the rest of your life is in a shambles. The only men that can pursue a non-Platonic unity of the virtues, an Aristotelian realistic unity of the virtues where you get them one at a time, all Catholic to the man, because they have that proper rapport, creature to creator, from the first commandment in order. It's really important that we address that objection, I think, because there will be guys out there that are like, I succeeded without it. Yeah. Only in one accidental aspect of being.
I'd like to build on that with your own words, Tim, in the last chapter of Case for Patriarchy, which is this extremely disordered view of success, the sacramentalization of work itself. So it's like, congratulations, you've made $100 million. You're confusing that with success in a vocation. You might have a skill at making money. That's not success. Success is like being a deeply virtuous patriarch who might make $70,000 a year. So just to throw on top of that, even the metrics in which they're saying I'm successful, I would push back a little bit and say, like, yeah, but are you?
Yeah, that's right. Because Bill Gates has maxed out that metric, boys. And if you look at him and that's your model of manhood, really? Was that where you're going? And they'll say, no, because he's not strong enough. It's all about physicality. And then you can easily show them, like Tim says, countless athletes who've got plenty of muscles but no spine to hang them on and will cuck and bend the knee and bow for all kinds of things. Like, oh, but bro, I thought you said that bowing and kneeling wasn't masculine. And look at these guys, 280 pounds, bent over double in front of a pride flag. Are they your masculine idols? Oh, it's not them. It's not Bill Gates. So who is it? The answer is that Satan can get you rich. He can get you successful. He's the prince of this world. And when Christ is offered the world and all its riches, as long as, and Satan adds this, if you will kneel to me, he says no and turns it all down and stays standing strong. So that's what it's about. They've got a misconception about what it means to be a man.
You know, look at Alex Hormozy, a YouTuber who I watch for everything business related. I think he's a wildly successful and insightful person. His wife is has about as husky a voice as he does, and he is an absolute simp. You know, completely defers to her on everything. Not on everything, but just like interpersonally, it's well, what does Layla think? And he's an atheist who thinks that when you die, everyone's going to forget about you. Nothing happens. And so what he's doing right now is for the love of the game, and he's not going to have kids. He and his wife have decided they're not going to have kids. Okay. That man makes over $85 million a year. And the secularists, the red pill people want to say that's success.
Yeah. Yeah. What's frightening is if people look at that, and I'm not saying none of us here have done it. I'm sure we have. They look at that with all of those stats on paper, and they're like, "Yep, this is a male exemplar." And I mean, what Will pointed out and what you're pointing out, Nick, is they have to immediately start itemizing again. You go, "Oh, Bill Gates or Alex Hormozy, that's a man. That's really the kind of rapport you want with your wife." Is it what about the old Eve bio argument that the species just wants to procreate? What are all these dudes? I started having to tell this to my childhood friends. Don't you want to procreate? I thought that's a really good animal. If you're an atheist and you're kind of an Evo bio guy, isn't Jim Bob Duggar your model then? And so they have to start itemizing and being like, well, this from Bill Gates. This from, Arnold Schwarzenegger. This from, LeBron James, best built 6'8" guy, I think, in probably the history of the world. Also an evil loser and an overrated basketball player. But best frame on a 6'8" guy you could ever wish to have. Go through it. They're itemizing like it's the Nico McKeon ethics. They're just doing it ordered improperly, ordered oppositely.
Yep.
And they don't admit it.
So true. And we've got a question about this very thing. How does the concept of masculinity within Christianity offer a more preferable or distinctive perspective compared to the masculinity advocated by Nietzscheans and Baptists, Bronze Age pervertists? And he's basically just Nietzsche dumbed down for our times. Fundamentally, all his messages are Nietzschean, and he acknowledges that. So in a nutshell, it's this. Both those two thinkers operate within an atheistic framework. And Nietzsche in particular, and I used to be a Nietzschean when I was a kid because I liked all the stuff about physical strength and hardship. And there's some stuff in there which is basically Christianity gone wrong. He tells you to embrace the cross, but he tells you to do it on your own back, with your own power, with no humility, without Christ to help you do it. So it's for the right kind of guy, and I was one of them. Tim, you nodding, you're one too. There's something in Nietzsche that does appeal to men because he's saying, don't be a pussy, basically. Life is tough. You need to get through it. And it's important for us to be able to face this. The problem is when you start talking about a higher man and you say, hold on a second, by what objective standard is this higher within your atheistic universe where you acknowledge there's no truth? And you can't even do that because that's self-contradictory. To say there is no truth, you're claiming it's true. You're just cutting off the branch you're sitting on. What's the standard by which the higher man is higher? The great blonde beast that Nietzsche talks about, the ideal man, which all the Baptists simp over, the blonde Viking who's tanned and got his veins out and his arms out. It's like, yeah, that's a real man. Well, why? Because he's physically strong? That's the metric, is it? Evolution is pointless. The entirety of life has no meaning. So why should strength be any better than intelligence? And why are you guys sitting here complaining that you've been tricked by another ethnic group who aren't notorious for being big and strong, but have somehow dominated you ruthlessly and you're crying a victim narrative about how they played you because they were smarter. Oh, but it wasn't fair because they tricked you. By what standard is it not fair? It makes no sense. Christianity has the objective standard to be able to say, this is what we must conform ourselves to. This is how we flourish as men, as the rational animal. God is truth with a capital T. And the function of us as rational animals is conform ourselves to that. So we get complete clarity, whereas before it's just confusion. Elliot, what have you noticed about the different standards that people try to give for what makes a man?
Well, if we go back to the root word of father, we're talking about masculinity. There's no masculinity without the father. The word father coming from, pater, we got paternos, right? Pattern. The pattern of a thing is its least tangible. The least tangible is where the most power is. When we're hypnotized by the material world, we're partaking of the mommy culture, we're suckling culture, material sensual gratification. But all power, and you just look at the kingdom, in the world, like what is the densest of things? A rock, right? And then you get softer. A tree is softer. It's lighter. The density is less. And then what next? You have the animal kingdom. Well, the animal kingdom is not nearly as dense as the tree that will be there for 1,000 years. It's softer. But what happens as it gets softer and less tangible, its intelligence goes up. And as the intelligence goes up, its ability to create, its ability to thrive and survive, its intangible strength increases, right? The strength of rock is very dense, very dumb. The strength of an animal is not nearly as dense and not nearly as stable and sensual, but its power is its intelligence. You brought that up. And then you get to the peak, which is man. And man's power is in the most intangible thing there is, which is thought. The rock ain't thinking. The plant not really thinking the way we're thinking, doesn't have reason. The animal doesn't have that kind of thought. And so the ultimate of strength, or as you go higher and less tangible, the more you get to the essence of a thing, closer you get to its real strength. And so for a man to be at his peak, to be at his highest, to be at his strongest, has to be it has to be eternal. It has to be intangible. It has to be everlasting. It has to be spirit. And so that's the ultimate strength. And the great thing about that is it can't be taken away. It can't be destroyed. A rock can be destroyed. An animal can be destroyed. Man can be destroyed, but his soul, his spirit, that which he taps into through his imagination, through his thought, through prayer, through worship, raising himself up to the divine, that's the ultimate in superpowers.
That's it. So as a rational animal, the thing that is highest in us is our rationality, and it's your eternal life, ultimately, that determines your success in life. You can be a success in this life.
I need to throw that word in there because, I don't know why, but it dawned on me this morning that where Paul says faith is the evidence of things unseen, right? It's something of that nature. It's like, so when you are a faithful person, you tap into the evidence of that which is unseen. And that has tremendous power.
Yeah, completely right. And it's what ultimately counts, because you can be a 6'3" guy who's 280 and super lean and be a complete disaster of a man. And none of your gym lifts are going to count for anything when you die and you get judged. And just for what it's worth, homosexuality has always been big in bodybuilding culture, right back to ancient Greece. A lot of men simping over each other and idolizing the male body. So Christianity says, no, look, you can train, you can be physically fit, sports are good, they help you with your character formation, but they're not the be-all and end-all. Otherwise, why not worship a little chimp or a gorilla who can rip off the 280-pound guy's arms despite weighing 110? That's strong. The monkey's the winner in that case. So total nonsense. It's disordered. So the next thing we've got is we know that religion is the top moral virtue because it concerns the things most serious in life. And from that fact, we can actually tell what it means to be a successful man. Why do we need to do things like use incense, water, oil, sacramentals? Why do we need to kneel? Why do we need to involve our bodies in our worship? Nick, do you want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah. Putting a slight bow on the question about the religion is the highest virtue and why it's the thing most worthwhile to do is it starts with the behaviors that you're describing, and religion is a set of rules and behaviors. It starts with proper orientation. You have an orienting reflex, right? So if you love masculine aesthetics, right? If you want your male body to be as properly developed as it can be, if you love that, then you enact the principles of weightlifting, strength training, and nutrition. Well, if you love the Logos, the source of truth, beauty, and goodness, you keep his commandments. It's Christ's own words. If you love me, keep my commandments. So the predicate there is love. And that means recognizing that the true, the good, and the beautiful are something that you should be greedy for. I think, as Elliot described, that greed, that's good. If it's the one true God, then it's good to be greedy for that. I think God, as a jealous God, wants that. He's talked about that in the Old Testament. He wants his people to there's definitely a better word than lust, but long for Yahweh and only Yahweh. So if you love Christ, you keep his commandments. So then what are the commandments? Well, this kind of goes back to the debate that Tim just had. It's like, well, good thing we have a sacred tradition which has protected and articulated all of the traditions that properly order man in his behavior to loving the Logos, Jesus Christ. And that's, once again, the difference between the Protestant performative stage presentation of worship and the prayer of the Rosary, or something like the Latin Mass. One of these things actually orients you and resonates with the true, the good, and the beautiful, and the other looks very similar to Taylor Swift's worldwide tour for some reason. And which do you think of those has been, handcrafted by the Holy Spirit?
Yeah, that's a great point to include there. So we involve the body in worship because we want that cultivation of physical discipline as a way of also cultivating the right kind of spiritual attention, the right state of mind. People know this when you're just dancing around being a fool like a little kid, and it makes you feel silly mentally as well. Whereas it's when you come into church, you show reverence, there's quiet, you adopt certain postures, it puts you into a different frame of mind. Ultimately, it's because we're not just spiritual beings like angels, we also have bodies, we're corporeal too. So the corporeal has to be involved in the worship, if that makes sense. Elliot, I know that you do things like bioenergetics with breathing, and from long while back with a New Age background, they understand the importance of the body, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If we agree that it's the human mind that makes us unique, and where the stamp of God really is, it's in that soft part of us. It reaches into this world through the body, and so we're a spectrum of sorts. And so if the body is incapable of receiving the Holy Spirit, is incapable of expanding its mind in a way as to unite with God, then you've got a blockage. And that's why, if you're unhealthy people are not spiritual people, because they've got blocks. The mechanism by which God reaches into the world is flawed. It's polluted. It's crippled. And so, I don't know how we lost it in the West, and a lot of Eastern traditions still carry it. But things like yoga, and I'm not saying that you need to go do yoga, but it's an understanding that as my body is, that my soul can receive. In my body is how I can receive and demonstrate what I am in God. The body and the mind is not separate. In fact, when in Genesis, when it speaks of God breathing into the dirt, into the dust, into the clay to create Adam, it's not separate from breath. The breath of life is a literal thing. If you stop breathing, well, there you go. The whole thing's over. Hopefully you can meet your maker after that. But if you're going to continue to engage in this world, we have an interface that needs to be considered. And so, yeah, things like exercising, eating well, breathing right. I don't know where that sort of became a new age thing. It's very much rooted in everything Christian, right? By the mere virtue of Christ becoming physical, God becoming man, our faith has to. And I don't think I just don't think the tradition has done enough. I know of John Paul's theology of the body, and I think it's a fascinating take, and I hope to learn more, but I don't think we've given it as much focus on what's required physically for us to truly walk in the light of Christ.
Yeah, that's so true.
We cannot separate the two. The body, even in forms of prayer, right? Prostrations. This is the Catholic faith is so expensive, and I'm not sitting here saying that it can be improved upon, but it's beautiful that things are unveiled and revealed, and not that the faith ever changes, but we learn more. All we have to do to recognize truth and maybe give credit where credit's due, or to open up doors where the physical body can be honored more, of course, is through our Lord. But the Mass itself, our form of worship, we're eating. Our part of our faith is to eat. We eat. We literally put into our mouth and gnaw on our God. Right. And we pray on our knees. You mentioned before the incense, the genuflecting, the kneeling and the standing and processions. I mean, it is all very, very, very physical. I know that there is a heresy, of course, Tim, you will remind me, where there's this idea that the body is somehow bad, that we need to discard of the body. And there are traditions where I read a lot of the church of the Desert Fathers, where there's like, let's get away from the body as much as possible. But I don't think that's consistent with an incarnate faith.
That phrase, Elliot, the incarnate faith, is the key thing, because physical culture, the thing that the Nietzscheans and the Baptists try to claim as their own by simping over statues of Greek athletes, is actually Christian. The religion of the resurrection, of the incarnation, is what owns the body. And you can make as much of a fuss over your herbal tea and your shisha pipes and your new age bodily practices as you like, but you're rotting in the grave according to that belief system, and you don't have a body in heaven. In Christianity, after the general resurrection, you have a body. You have a heavenly body. You're reunited with it. So that's why we take it seriously. And I noticed someone put in the comments, Will's getting spicy when I was talking about not going too far into weightlifting, etc. The irony is that most of these guys who complain when I knock that down a few pegs or two, they don't take it as seriously as I do. I've benched 420, squatted 600, deadlift 700. That's more than most of these people who claim that weightlifting is the number one most important thing in life. I'm doing it to a higher level as a side gig, kept in its proper place. It's important. Sure, as Christians, we can take pride in it. We can enjoy it. We can say thanks to God for the opportunity to train and everything else that comes with it with athletics. We just don't idolize it. So you get everything that's good everywhere in life, but in its proper place. So that's the thing to remember. And Elliot, what you said there about the body having to be kept healthy, your life having to be ordered so that you can receive God. That leads into what I want to say next, when Aquinas makes these points about cleanness and stability being necessary for worship. Everyone knows this. Like, think about a meth head or a crackhead that you might see in the street and how broken they are, how disordered they are. they haven't got the cleanness, they haven't got the stability to be able to practice the virtues well. They can turn their lives around with God's grace, but because virtue is a skill, it's a habit, it's something we have to practice that we get better at. It can come easily to us, or it can come very hard to us as well. Very difficult to do. So by keeping our minds clean, our bodies clean, Aquinas makes this point. Cleanness is necessary in order that the mind be applied to God, since the human mind is soiled by contact with inferior things, even as all things depreciate by admixture with baser things. For instance, silver by being mixed with lead. So if you're pumping junk into your mind all day long, if you're deranging your mind with psychedelics and porn, what do you think is going to happen to your intellect? What do you think is going to happen to your will as well, following your depraved intellect? It's all downhill. You can even become so disordered, you don't even know how disordered you are anymore. And I hope no one listening knows what it's like to get to that point, but some people do. And then you also need stability too. After the cleanness, Aquinas points out the importance of stability or firmness. He says firmness is required for the mind to be applied to God, for it is applied to him as its last end and first beginning, and such things must needs be most immovable. Immovable. That's about the masculine strength of principle and commitment. You've decided, you've thought things through to conclusion that this is the most important thing in life, and you have like nailed your colors to that mast. You pledged your sword. This is how you're going to live as a man, and whatever comes your way, maybe a increase in salary, a paycheck. Someone saying, just come off that difficult road you've chosen for yourself, and we'll lavish all these gifts on you. Life can be so much. Does that make sense, Tim?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one time, I think it was on Taylor Marshall's channel, it might have been on my own, I said the Christian view of the soul from Aristotle's De Anima, which is that I said there's a plant soul, there's an animal soul, there's a human soul, and all the morons got mad, kind of like you're saying, guys that can bench not half of what you can bench pretend to be the ultimate champions of the discipline, and you're like, no, I went way further than you. There is a plant soul. It corresponds to the two functions, growth and nutrition, and they're like Russian dolls. Animals, the next level up, have the plant soul. Animals have two new ergonomics in their soul, which are locomotion and sensation. Most of the complex animals have the five senses, in addition to the plant soul, which is vegetative. It's growth and nutrition. Only human beings have rationality, reason, and intellect, and the possibility of being voluntary, having a will. And it's the rational soul, whether you count that as one or two things, that because it's in ergonomics that doesn't correspond to any body part, that's why Aquinas says that the human soul lives on, whereas the animal and the plant soul don't. The mark of a man as the only rational animal, there are angels, but they're incorporeal, right? They're pure intelligence. The mark of the only animal who is rational. So, someone got mad at me that I said man's an animal. They're like, oh, you sound like a Darwinist. I was like, well, Darwin didn't say that we have an immortal and rational soul. So go try reading a book instead of burning them or whatever. The mark of a man is that you use your intellect and your will, like you're saying, to decide what kind of man am I. And you decide it every day. And it is intellect first, will follows. This is the kind of man I'm going to be. That I want to be virtuous. This is the kind of man I'm going to be. I'm going to seek pleasure. This is the kind of man I'm going to be. I'm going to seek honor as the highest, have a high reputation, but without backing it up. And you kind of make that your metric. And every day, people are proofing their theories about manhood. The animals don't do this, and plants certainly don't. But we're living out our philosophies, and some men choose wisely, and basically everyone else chooses poorly. Aristotle says that the average man leads the apolostic life, a life fit for a beast, a life fit for a cattle. And Boethius says, well, this isn't as bad as living the way a cattle does, because for them it's natural. For a man to live as a cattle does is infinitely lower than a cattle because it's unnatural. It's disproportionately low. So the point is that the way that you guys choose to live and I try to live is not only it's a battle of ideas, really, because the proof, as a man, you know that the proof of your worldview, what you've chosen to be your res publica, your everything, is your life. At the end of the day, here's my work product. Now, I've tried to do all the stuff well. I've tried to be temperate and have all the virtues, at least all the other cardinal ones. And at the end of the day, I was a religious man, meaning I had a more important fifth where I consecrated my works to the Lord. The great act you can do to consecrate your every work you do in the day. I interviewed David Torkington yesterday, and he just said, do the morning offering. He's like, my dad never talked to me about faith, but every day at 9, 12, and 3, my dad would have a little alarm would go off and he'd disappear for a minute. And his dad was going to give the offering of his works. It's beautiful. The morning offering, most of us learned in Catholic grade school. It takes 20 seconds. I was thinking I would add that right now because it's relevant to my answer here, but also because we did the show on prayer on Elliot's channel recently. Consecrate whatever you're doing so that it's not a useless, merely material success that you get. If you consecrate it to God, then all of a sudden, you've got the force of 1,000 suns. And the point is, men can choose. Men do choose. Men must choose. Choose wisely. At the end of the day, your life is the proof of your ideology. This is slightly tangent to the call of the question, but I think it's an important follow-up on prayer as well, that stems from the true conception of the human soul versus animal plane.
Yeah, that's a great point to add, Tim. You've quoted before in a previous CMASC that Nietzsche said, when you write it in blood. And that's one of the things I liked about him. He takes things seriously, even though he's wrong. At least he's serious. And what you're saying there is you're writing your life in blood as well. This is as real as it gets when you're committing what the intellect has chosen as the good through your will, through your body, through your actions day to day. That's really what it means to be a man of action in the world, living out what God's commands are. So we've covered all the points that I wanted to. And just want to reiterate what we started with, which is that as men, as human beings, as rational animals, we perfect ourselves by subjecting ourselves to God. This idea that we're not supposed to kneel or worship to God because that's not masculine couldn't be more wrong-headed for all the reasons we've gone through today. And I wanted to finish with a prayer that I really like. I'll put it into the comments on YouTube in case people want to join in and add it onto the screen here. We've got Mike Pantili, by the way, on Instagram. If you follow him, Mike's Protestant, but as you can see from the fact that he's here, he's interested in what we have to say. He's also one of the world's only 800-pound deadlifters. So he's another Christian guy who is super strong. And even after I go through periods of hammering Protestantism on Instagram, Mike and I are still friends. I love Mike. And one day I'm going to convert him to Catholicism. But he's here. Good to see you, Mike. And here we go with this prayer, which some of you guys might know, some of you might not. It's St. Ignatius of Loyola's self-dedication to Christ. And I think it's a great one. So you can probably see it. I'll go through it with you. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, take all of my freedom, my memory, my understanding, and my will. All that I have and cherish, you have given me. I surrender it all to be guided by your will. Your grace and your love are enough for me. Give me these, Lord Jesus, and I ask for nothing more. Amen. So for me, that prayer just sums up so much of what we've said today about what's important in life and who we have to honor. The best things about you don't come from you. They come as gifts from God. And masculinity is about acknowledging that. So it's been really great to talk with you guys about this. Such a privilege to be able to speak with you every week. And thanks to everybody for watching as well.